Greetings, everyone, and welcome to CDO Club World Headquarters here in lovely Long Beach, New York. Another beautiful day. Welcome to the second annual Alation Global CDO Summit. This is our second consecutive year with our partner Alation, in addition to their three other events that they did in 2021 in their Data for the Win series. Thanks to everyone at Alation, especially Brandon Paskey, and their moderators for the Data for the Win series, including Myles, Suer, Ibi Rahman, and John Myles. We really appreciate it. I'm David Matheson, the CEO of the CDO Club and CDO Summit, and it's a pleasure to be your host today. This is our 10-year anniversary for doing the CDO Club and the CDO Summit. As many of you know, we were the first to create an event and a community specifically for CDOs and CAOs way back in 2013, when there were just a couple of hundred people with those exact titles. So thanks to all of you for your hard work and your support, especially during these challenging times with the pandemic and in the United States, civil unrest, and now trouble in the world with war in Ukraine. So please stay well and be healthy. Coming up today, we've got an exciting program for you. The first session is an opening keynote from Myles Suer, which is going to be on self-service business intelligence. Myles is the Director of Solutions Marketing for Alation. And we're going to follow that by a deeper 45-minute panel with Myles as the moderator on the same topic. He has got an incredible panel lined up. I think he said it was the first time he's ever been surrounded by an all-woman panel. So we're really excited to have Danielle, the Chief Data Officer for Albertsons. As many of you know, Danielle was recently the CDO for American Express for about 9 years. She's joined by Iyengar, who's Chief Data Officer at Cognizant, and Robin Gordon, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at MetLife, who many of you have seen on our programs before. We have a new person joining today, Sharon Crotchwell. Really excited to have her. You may not know of Capri Holdings, but Sharon is a global analytics and data at Capri Holdings, which is many of you women know Michael Kors, Jimmy Choo, Versace, and some of you guys too, right? So that's the first panel, the opening panel. Following the opening panel and keynote, we'll have our second and final panel of the day, which will be on practical digital and data transformation, lessons across industries. And we're going to be joined by that one with our moderator, Michael Krigsman, who many of you know is CEO at CXO Talk and an industry analyst. He's going to be joined by Anjali Reddy, who is the Chief Data Governance Officer at Citi Commercial Bank. Joining Anjali, we'll have Bernardo Rodriguez, the Chief Digital and Technology Officer at JD Power. Joining Bernardo will be Barty Rai, who's VP and Head of Insights, Analytics, Data, and Commercial Operations at Novartis. And finally, Brian Odor, batting cleanup. He's the Head of Data and Insights at New York Public Radio. And as many of you know, New York Public Radio is the crown and the jewel of NPR's radio station. So we're excited to have Brian on the program today. Stick around, because after that, we're going to briefly review the three previous events in Alation's Data for the Win series. We'll be live, so be sure to stick around, ask questions through chat and through the QA button. And finally, stick around till the very end, because we're going to have the CDO Club's U.S. Chief Digital Officer of the Year Awards, both for 2020 and 2021, Many of you know we didn't do an event or an award in 2020 because of the pandemic, and I certainly didn't want to give it to the virus. So we're going to be giving out both the 2020 award, which I have here, and the 2021 award. So stick around till the very end and help us congratulate the winner. And without further ado, let's start the program. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Hi, this is Myles Suer, and I'm thrilled to talk about the journey to self-service BI. I've learned a lot. You're going to learn a lot from the panelists that we have coming up. I've learned a lot from CIOs and others in my facilitation of CIO chat, and I love to share with you the wisdom that I've gotten from them about this journey to self-service BI. Obviously, we all know there's an explosion of data happening. Data can really impact organizations, and obviously the adoption has increased. But I really like American Family, who's one of our customers at Alation. One of the sayings that the leader there had to say was that they wanted to move from being a data-rich organization to a data-driven organization. And I think that's really encapsulates well what people are trying to do along this journey. There have been, a lot of challenges that have driven the need for self-service. The first thing that we're seeing is that businesses need to get more agile. And that creates an interesting dynamic, which is that organizations need to push decision-making down the organization. What that does is it creates a larger audience that needs data for the first time, and then it makes a bottleneck happen. And what I've heard from CIOs and CDOs repeatedly is they don't want IT to be a bottleneck for decision making. If you're trying to move faster, the last thing you want is a request to get in the way. And so, if you want to move from being data rich to data driven, self-service, it becomes a key way of breaking that bottleneck and moving forward faster. There's a lot of outcomes that come out of self-service, a shorter time to value. One of the big things we're hearing from CDOs is this notion of being able to transform the business and how it operates. And then that leads to lower costs. It leads to being more agile in marketing. It leads to being able to transform. And most importantly, it leads to faster innovation. If you can see a trend faster and you have a set of privileged insights there, you have an ability to win at your business in contrast to others that are out there. In order to be good at self-service, there's a bunch of things that we find from our discussions with CIOs and others that need, and CDOs, of course, that need to happen. The first is that you need to fix the end-to-end data value chain. So this request model, while it needs to be retained, it can't be the dominant way that people go and get the data they need to make decisions. What we need to do, in effect, is make it easier for people to acquire the data, to make a decision. It's critical that they be able to know something about the data, but also be able to determine its fundamental trustworthiness. People want to make good decisions, not just a decision, but they want to make good decisions. What we want to do is we want to move the request model and the analysts to creating new data sources and new data for new questions that haven't been asked before, rather than repeating themselves. One of the things I keep finding in my discussions with folks is that duplicate requests are common, where the dominant way to acquire data is through a request model. There's some processes that people need to do in order to get to self-service. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's critical before you go down this journey that you determine your mission. What are you trying to do? What are your prioritized use cases? Have the executive sponsorship, get those use cases, implement, fix data where it needs to be fixed, and then get it deployed as fast as possible. In fact, one of the things we're discovering, which is fascinating, is data governance is important, but if you can get business users seeing the data and start that data culture and literacy early on, it's really valuable. I like this quote a lot because it kind of contextualizes well what people are thinking about it. Obviously, it's about, first off, how do I get people, and especially people who aren't power users, to be able to find the data they need to make decisions? And then you break the battle of this request model by actually enabling them to figure out if they can answer the question. If they can't get that answered question, if they can't reduce that cycle time of the decision, then of course put a request in. And this is from an enterprise CIO that I know well, and I really liked what they had to say here. Some case studies. There are really, three sets of stakeholders we find that take advantage of self-service. Obviously, the end business user is a critical one, but it's also the people who create reports, the business analysts, and then lastly, it's those decision scientists who are using it to make models. I found these case studies, and I always look at case studies from the perspective of the customer, these to be amazing at how much time people are able to save by having self-service at the front end of their process and making it easy to discover the data you need to win as an organization. And that's my final slide. So I hope this provides a good overview for you on self-service. In the panel, we're going to take it the next step, and we're going to hear from a group of all-stars, as I think of them, in terms of what their experience is in terms of driving self-service. Hi, this is Myles Suer, and I'm thrilled to be with a great group of CDOs. And I have to say it's a first, and I'm really pleased with it. We've got all women CDOs here, so that's fantastic. So I want to start with a question. Self-service has been something that's been around for a while. What was the biggest driver of it in your minds? And as important, has this, remote, or eventually we'll have remote and hybrid work, is that becoming a big driver of self-service as well? So I'm going to start with Kala. Could you share your perspectives?
Just to introduce myself, I'm Kala Iyengar, and I'm the Chief Data Officer at Cognizant. I have spent about 2 decades in the software industry, driving big data product development and analytics, data security, privacy, and data governance. And I understand the need to strengthen data management, promote data acumen across the organizations, and accelerate a transition to the data-driven culture. So now, Myles, to answer your question, really, Cognizant's business goals are to accelerate digital transformation, increase relevance to our clients, globalize Cognizant, and to reposition our brand. To do this, we need to treat data as an enterprise asset and learn to leverage it for data-driven decisioning. So we want to create a more intelligent enterprise that uses data to improve our business processes, operating models, and business operations to measure, drive, and achieve these business goals. So self-service BI is a key initiative to support these goals, enabling anyone in the company to leverage curated data sources on a central platform. So this will provide consistent analytics and reporting. We all understand, that is one of the biggest issues today, not having the consistency in reporting. So that's where we have our single version of truth. That's what we call at Cognizant, while at the same time providing the flexibility for exploratory data analytics. Self-service BI enables us to do this through data-driven decision-making, improve our customer experience, revenue, margin, process cost improvements. We're a professional services company, new products and services, better governance of risk and compliance, etc. So really, that's how at present we are utilizing BI as our BI organizational goal.
Thank you. Robin, what's your experience at MetLife?
We're very much pivoting towards sort of inculcating data as part of our culture. And so self-service for us gives us an opportunity to start to get more of a hands-on feel of the data that we have and how we can utilize it and stuff. So we're big supporters and fans of business intelligence and then self-service business intelligence for the reasons that it helps to create that data culture. Also, so what's interesting in insurance industry is that you've got pockets of very advanced data users. Your actuaries were probably the forefounders of data usage long before CDOs and data was a thing within organizations. So when you start to pivot to that user base, you've got they want to do advanced data science in a self-service sort of mode. But you've got a lot of people across the organization that just haven't had that exposure to the data. We've got tons of data, but probably less so on the insights front. And so self-service gives us a chance to bring those people along. And business intelligence, I've always said, is kind of the gateway to data-driven decisioning. It's the easy stepping stone to getting more and more into analytics and advanced analytics. So that's kind of a flavor of how we think about it and interact with our business users.
Very different audiences there. And I had a friend, Alan Hackney, who was at John Hancock, who had the same kind of issues. And he got along with the folks you're talking about initially because he knew how to do Six Sigma. So it's interesting. Danielle, you've been at a lot of different places, American Express and now at Albertsons. What's it like at Albertsons? How is self-service helping there?
Well, Albertsons is a very large company, right, with 2,200 stores and lots of different divisions that are running our stores nationwide. And it's important that they have access to data right at their fingertips so that they can make better decisions to run those stores and to run our merchandising and to run all of the things that run a very complex retail business like grocery. And so the business insights that we've built are really about giving them that data, in as much of real time as possible at their fingertips to be able to make those decisions around, let's just say, everyone knows supply chain's a problem. Right. Mm-hmm. So how do we, give them the right data to be able to know what they should order, right? At what point in time, or how do we help to allocate those orders effectively across stores so they get to the customers that really need them and really want them? So this is making sure that both that data, the BI and the data science are there for them when they need them is really critical.
And Sharon, you're in a little different type of retail organization. What's your experience been with self-service?
Well, Michael Kors and now Capri have had self-service for quite some time, but it's been really in your very basic subject areas. What's been driving us at Michael Kors and now Capri are two key business goals that we have. The first is really developing a deep understanding of our customer. And the second is growing our e-commerce business. From an understanding the customer perspective, that in luxury retail, product always matters, right? But about 6 years ago, our CEO had an epiphany and he realized that we really have to understand our customer in order to deliver that product to the right customer at the right time. A very standard CRM, which was not standard in luxury retail at all, because it was all about stores and personal service. As we pivoted, they hired me to come in and build a data and analytics function around both the customer as well as our other goal was e-commerce, right? So we had a very large store network. Our network is global, which is another interesting element here. But the other thing was to grow our e-commerce business. And in fact, that's where we started, because in retail, and particularly luxury retail, the e-commerce teams are the most digitally literate and therefore the most data literate. And so we started expanding our self-serve offering from traditional BI to much more interactive applications. Might be reporting, but it's also, modeling and different types of segmentation that people could do themselves. So we pushed that out to the business. And in our first year, we had 70 plus business users start adopting the technology, which was very encouraging, because as we move into customer, which is a much more challenging data subject area, we're leveraging some of those learnings. But at the end of the day, it's all about definitional and methodological consistency globally, right? Because we can't have somebody in Europe counting new customers differently than they're counted in North America or at Jimmy Choo or at Versace. So that definitional consistency and the ability to manage the business globally has been critically important to driving self-serve BI, but really more taking it to the next level.
I was reading in Beyond Digital about Zara and their ability to find out what things were flying off the shelf and then say to the designers, wow, build more of those and less of these kind of things. So you really are kind of at the forefront there. Robin, When you think about stakeholders for self-service, is it the business users first, the business analyst, or the data scientists? Who do you think is most important, or is it everybody?
From a self-service standpoint, we start with the business user because we really want to understand what they're trying to do. That dictates the type of data that they get access to and the tooling that they get access to. A lot of times we'll find that in the self-service mode, there is some data prep that has to happen in the background, and we would prefer to manage that and support that within the data organization. So it starts with the business user, probably moves over to the data analyst, and then lastly, the data scientist, if there's something more complex that we have to noodle over. As I noted before, a lot of the self-service functions outside of the actuarial use cases tend to be a little bit more narrowly focused. So the data sets, the scope and stuff is a little bit more in a controlled group. So I think it warrants having that sort of business-driven emphasis at that level of usage and self-service.
Danielle, what are you finding? Who are your biggest users? It sounded like you're really trying to get into the business user population.
Yes. So I think that from a business insights tool perspective, right, you always have to think about, when you're building any product, right, you have to think about who your users are, who your customer is. And in BI, it really is the business user. When you're thinking about maybe your data platforms, then you're talking about more like the data scientists, et cetera. But in business, in BI self-service, it's really about the business users and how do you make the capability as accessible for them and as usable for them, and different models in different places, right? For us, it's a federated model where we like to make sure that our business users have the ability to build their own dashboards and reports in our BI tools so that it's the most, relevant for them. And so the product we try to build is one that scales across the organization and enables those capabilities for the people who need them.
No, that makes total sense. Sharon, what would you add?
Actually, what I would add, and business users, I agree, are very, very important and critical to success. If they don't accept it, then it doesn't matter. But for us, one of the areas we have focused on heavily is the concept of a data product manager, where we no longer have data owners, we have data product managers by subject area. So, for example, we have an analytics center of excellence, and within that center of excellence, we have teams like data science, advanced analytics, but we also have data product managers. So I have a digital data product manager, a customer data product manager, supply chain data product manager. And what their job really is to understand the data that's available, how it can be used, as well as how it cannot be used. They're the experts in their subject area. They help with the data governance, and data governance is critically important because we've had situations early on where a European team did an analysis on North American data and it was completely wrong, but it went to the CEO. So not good. So, we've really tried to add that level of governance, but with the expertise in the specific data subject area. For us, a really good example of how a data product manager adds value is, I know everybody's dealing with the Apple Mail privacy protection. Okay. So what that is, for anybody who doesn't know, is that any email that is sent to an Apple client is auto-opened. Okay. So what that means is the email open signal is no longer valid for anybody with an Apple client. So while this is a really specific example, it is critically important to business users and business KPIs. So if you're using open rate as a KPI, on September 21st, our open rate skyrocketed because we had a very significant percentage of our emails being opened on Apple clients. So that signal is no longer valid. Then the data product manager jumps in, alerts everybody, helps, then solve the problem. So do we need this signal anymore? Yes or no? And then if we do need the signal, how can we deal with the situation to keep that signal at least clear for a subset of our emailable customer base? So really, there's so much emerging in what's happening in digital data specifically, but then in data sources, how we're collecting data, where we're collecting data, that without that expertise, that gets lost and then the data gets misused, misunderstood, and you're not providing real business value.
I really like your concept of data product managers. This is the first time I've heard it, but I think it means a lot. And then it means they need to have some business orientation as well. So neat way of doing it. Kala,
Yeah.
what do you want to add to this conversation here?
I so agree with you, Sharon. I think for us, the business data managers that you call, we call them probably data owners, which is probably the term that's more of a data governance term, but absolutely similar concept that we have here. Business users definitely play a very important role, and self-service BI capabilities should have a low barrier of entry and be suitable for everyone in the entire organization to leverage our business analytic capabilities. And why I bring that concept of data product managers or data owners is that there is an ownership in data. Even though data is considered as an enterprise asset, there is still an ownership of data that the data owners have to provide the approvals to use of data. So we give them a very important place. And then secondly, the business users, they're very critical because there is no point standing up a technologies, a stack, and there is no use case that maps to our delivery. Then we're just duplicating data, creating a lake or a semantic layer, and then just doing our analytics on it that doesn't have all particular use cases. So while all stakeholders are critical to the success of the self-service BI program, I think it is, however, important to have that top-down support, and that is comes from the business leaders and business users first.
So since we've talked about the importance of the business users becoming involved, how do you get data literacy and data culture put in so you really do have a successful BI initiative? I'll start with you, Danielle.
There's probably two ways to go about this, right? One is to run data literacy before you launch it, right? And the other one is to kind of have people learn as they go. I would say that in both of the places that I've been, it's been more of a learn as you go model, which is to deploy the BI and then teach, right? And it gives them a sense that at that point you get a sense of they can dive into the data and you can teach them about the data. And I think there's pros and cons to those two different models, right? But I've found that at least with the driving BI out there, giving them the tools and then doing the education, they have something to attach to and to learn. If you do it ahead of time, they may not grasp it as well as that hands-on learning, right? In an adult learning situation, hands-on learning is usually the better option. So we've always moved towards that. So I think that's the main, is to really give them the tools and then teach them about the tools and how they should apply that to their business in their area. And that's how we've approached data literacy.
Sharon, love to hear what you think. And one thing I'm going to add in, I remember being with a business leader one time who said, I need 6 months to figure out how a metric squeals. And so I'm wondering if there's some of that goes on too.
I think definitely, Myles, for sure. From our perspective, we have a little bit of a different focus. While I totally agree with Danielle on hands-on learning, really getting that data and getting their hands on it, we've tried to really start at the top with our CEO and our leadership team really being committed to data and data-driven decision-making. And so without that, I can teach and teach and teach and teach, and it's not going to matter. So, we have that. And then we have I'm going to call it evangelism, where we educate about the data subject area and how it interacts and how it affects business outcomes and KPIs. So we have a very common thing that happens now at Michael Kors is, if somebody's asking a question, somebody else is going to say, that's knowable. And if it's knowable, you go to the data. So it may be things that we want people to constantly be thinking about what is knowable and what we can use data for. And so then what that's really done for us is instill in people the question of, when they have a business question, what is knowable? How can I get more information about this? So the answer may be, well, we have this great BI report tool, whatever, But the other answer may be, okay, well, here's how we can do that. And here's what we can do for you. So we want people thinking very broadly about the interaction between the data and the decision, because you need that whole path. Data for data's sake and knowledge for knowledge's sake is useless if it can't drive a business outcome.
No, I like that relationship between data and the decision. So, Kala, what would you add to all this?
So one of the things that when I started, I faced was, as one of you mentioned here, I think Sharon, you mentioned about educating top down. So that none of the initiatives are successful unless we have that education, and that's exactly where we are starting. Educate the board, educate the CEO, educate our EC members. It's not like they don't know. What they don't know is why am I seeing inconsistencies in reporting? No, it's because it's not coming from the single source of truth that we are talking about. That's why you're seeing your reports may be coming in from Excel spreadsheets that are, somebody just downloaded and generated. So that's where, so it's the whole culture about education. And that's why we are putting a lot of importance and the ability to read, write, and communicate with data. It's critical, to success of any organization. And then unlocking the hidden value of our data assets, right? So we are trying to create that data first culture where everybody can communicate with the same vocabulary in a standardized and agreed upon way. That's why we give a lot of importance for our data governance function in our data and analytics organization, because that's where the change has to happen. And the goal is not for everyone to be trained as data scientists or statistician. It is about creating an appropriate level of curriculum that can be used in practice for the respective roles and functions. One of the sector folks that we are really focusing on are our data owners, explaining them their roles and responsibilities and accountability, which sometimes gets missing. So that's what our curriculum is all about, teaching top down and across the board on, being the ability to read, write, understand data, and then comes the decisioning and intelligence from that data.
So Robin, how are you responding in terms of data culture? And then I love some of the things earlier about consistencies and all of those things. How are you helping people to understand data better?
Well, certainly, I think each of the speakers had really good points. I would say it's probably and all of that, not or all of that, because there's a series of things that have to take place in order to create literacy and a culture of data-driven decisioning. I'll go in a slightly more philosophical direction and just say, when you try and impact culture, and I think it's really interesting that you've used that word, because if we just talked about data literacy, I think it would be much more black and white. But when we start talking about culture, we're talking about a belief system that somebody has that has to alter. And I see this a lot, not only in my organization, but in a lot of other organizations that are coming to terms with, making decisions off of data. If I have been rewarded and appreciated and successful as a result of my intuition, the questions I have are, can I rely on the data? Can I rely on the models? And what happens if those models or data are wrong and I make a decision that's wrong? And the worst case scenario is, what happens if the models or data is right and it's counter to the decisions I've been making up until this point? So you've got to give people a safe zone, an environment in which they feel as if they can make those mistakes and learn and adapt to a new type of approach without any sort of punitive action coming. And I think Kayla mentioned that, this sort of top-down, or Sharon, a top-down type of approach, but also adopting small wins. I was talking to a group of people the other day, and I'm like, the fact that you're in a virtual meeting right now and you've always been in a face-to-face meeting is in and of itself an indicator of this adoption of a digital sort of mindset. And, I think the same can be said for a data mindset. When you start to see the CEO or the head of HR or somebody else, peer of yours, making decisions off of data, or even making bad decisions, or acknowledging bad decisions, it starts to be okay. But we have to kind of make those small little steps in order to change that belief system. And then only can we start to really have the culture shift that's so necessary.
I love how you approached it. I mean, maybe we should call CDOs cultural anthropologists or something like that, because The belief system is really an interesting thought. Once you've gotten all the all of the, culture things and people have some level of literacy, what are the pieces that CDOs need to assemble at the technology level? And I'll start this one with Sharon. What do you need to put in place to enable these people to be successful?
So I'm going to come at this from a totally different way, because honestly, at Michael Kors, you need some sort of data platform in the cloud. There's a whole bunch of different technologies out there, and they're not necessarily better or worse. It's just you need to be able to define your data. You need to be able to search your data. It's more of a capabilities approach for us, as opposed to it's got to be Snowflake in the AWS cloud, right? I need a cloud-based data repository. I need a way to ingest data. I need a way to get data out. I need a team that can, whether it's a semantic layer, data marts, whatever I need. And honestly, I don't care if it's Power BI or Tableau or whatever tool, but you need a tool that's easy to use. And so from our standpoint, we're focusing on ease of use to enable use and to ensure people are engaging with the platforms and the technology.
Everything you said makes sense. The engagement part is the most important, right? Kala, what would you add to what Sharon's just said?
I think it also depends upon the volume of data and the type of data that you're dealing with. I've worked in very big data organizations and an organization that is a medium scale data, I would call it. So it really depends. But in any case, I agree that a centralized, modern, cloud-based, accessible, and trusted enterprise data platform, that is a must, as a key. And then key architectural components of a modern data platform should also include, a document store for structured, semi-structured, unstructured, no matter what type of organization you are, you have these three types of data repositories. So that a store, and then streaming data support. Then the semantic layer of abstracting the raw data into a business-friendly curated data sources, and for security purposes, also for data use business purposes, also data minimization, and all of those come into picture. And then again, API-based integrations, governance. I'm always screaming about governance, compliance, and monitoring capabilities. They are a must. So in addition, having a variety of user-friendly focused BI tools with enterprise publishing and sharing capabilities, I think will elevate not just the types of analytics possible, but also the methods and distribution of how users consume analytics. So at Cognizant, what we've done as a first step, also we've built what we call a centralized self-service analytics platform, which is not a platform that you would think where we are democratizing data or allowing people to come and pick and create their own dashboard. It's more about looking through the organization, because ours is a very big organization, very spread out organization, a federated kind of environment. So we are onboarding all of their dashboards and reporting into one central platform. So at least there is no duplication, and you're able to search those available dashboards and use them. And then the second step is about being able to create your own interactive dashboards and reporting capabilities.
Robin, what would you add to the discussion here?
So I agree with everything. Just BI tools, having a semantic layer, cloud-based technologies and stuff, have no disagreement there. I think the key for us has been delineating self-service business intelligence versus sort of self-service data analysis, and ensuring that we have appropriate data prep activities that are happening in the background that allow people to actually get to what they really want to do, instead of having to wrangle the data to the extent that gives them sort of the base data that allows them to ingest and do the business intelligence activities that they want to do. So that's kind of the big add-on that I would highlight, is just ensuring that there's some form of data curation, data preparation activities that are done prior to the user coming in. Otherwise, they're doing that themselves, and that can be frustrating and time consuming, and could cause actually probably that's where most of the inaccurate information starts to emanate from, because they're not doing the appropriate curation.
Danielle?
I would just add that when we look at it from the perspective of the types of constituents we have, right? So there's really two different major groups. One is data consumers, right? And the other is data producer. And so we look at it from that perspective, and then you layer on, okay, if they're a data producer, the main product that they are going to be interacting with is your data platforms, whether it's the cloud or whatever. Like, they're producing data and it needs to go somewhere, right? Those are usually your system owners and your product owners, depending on what type of organization you're in. And then you have the data consumers, right? Which is everything from business users, like people who are just looking at dashboards and BI tools, all the way through to data scientists who are, consuming that data at scale and building models. So you have to think about the different products and platforms that need to serve those different constituents.
Let's move to the producers, the people who hopefully are driving an automation layer and in terms of data models to automate how things go on. As we look at them, how does self-service help them? I mean, I remember this article that came out from the chief scientist at Booz & Company a while back, where he was talking about how data scientists could be better labeled data janitors. How does self-service enable them, Robin?
Yeah, I could attest to that. We're trying to do our damnedest to get to the point where all of the data prep and data curation is happening long before the data scientists and self-service need to get there, and they're really putting maybe the finishing touches on, but not having to go through the heavy lifting. Partly because we want them to spend time on value add stuff, partly because we also have data governance and things that we need to think about that go beyond sort of their immediate need of whatever they are trying to solution. Additionally, we're trying to get to the point where we've democratized our data extensively and people can start incorporating data assets that they're maybe not as familiar with, which then creates this need to have additional metadata and information about that. I think Sharon was talking a little bit about that, ensuring that there's consistency and common definitions and stuff. So we have a pretty competent set of actuarials and data scientists and stuff that are thinking about very complex things. And so a good portion of the work that we're focused on now is more on the upstream processes of how do we automate data governance, get more insight into all of the data that we have, because it's quite extensive, and then put that to use so that we can feed it up to our users of data. And I'd ultimately like to get to the point where we have predominantly citizen data scientists and citizen business intelligence users, because it makes my job a lot easier. I don't want to necessarily have to do that for them, and create the end result. I'd much rather get the data ready and able and have them proficient enough in that data to be able to sort of draw their own conclusions. I think that helps with some of the pieces we've talked about culture earlier. I think it helps in just being quick and nimble in how we utilize data to make decisions and move forward. And it just gives the empowerment to the user instead of a centralized team like mine.
No, it is interesting. I mean, I remember doing one model at a time, and then I could try something else and see if that worked. And now you can run them simultaneously. So maybe citizen data scientists can do something. I mean, it is an MBA requirement to take a little bit of this. So maybe we can even imagine others doing it. Sharon, is this promulgating in your organization as well?
Very much so. So our structure is in Capri. The Capri function is the function that creates the data, across the board and makes sure that data is reliable, does all the feature engineering, all the data prep work that you talked about, Robin, to create this single source of truth. And we have some data scientists and advanced analytics folks that create things that are scalable to all regions, all brands. What we do have in our business is a need for either brand and or region specific insights and information and models and data. And that's where this kind of the citizen data scientists, citizen business analysts come in, because they're leveraging all the capabilities that the centralized team has developed. So they can very rapidly answer business questions now. When I started, everybody was doing their own thing, right? 6 years ago, everybody was doing their own thing, and it was really bad, because you'd ask one person to run something and you ask another person to run that same thing, and the answers were different. So, that was very scary when I first started, and building this common data source and data store. And our data product managers are kind of the linchpin in all of this, because they own the data, they own the communication about the data, and they make that data through various feature engineering, bringing in additional data sources. They make that very accessible to all my citizen data scientists and citizen business analysts. We do that today, and that's really important for us for driving business outcomes, as opposed to people constantly coming to my team. I need this one off, I need that one off piece of information. We've empowered the local teams, or the regional teams, local teams, brand teams, to actually do that with common data, common definitions, common methods. We have a host of stored procedures that we built so that they don't have to think about how to do something, how to define it, how to create it. It's done.
Danielle, is the store manager going to start to do a model and figure out how much of the tomatoes should be there so it's always full?
No. I think that there's a very fine distinction here. And when you first said, data scientists being data janitors, I'm like, well, those are really expensive janitors. Right. So we want to make sure that, we have different roles and responsibilities, and we enable as much as possible data democratization, but data insight democratization, I think, is more of the focus that we have. And that is to make that, accessible and make it as easy for them to get the insights as they can. But data science is a very specific specialty. And I think that, you want to leverage those precious assets to do the work that only they can do. And so while we do have some citizen data scientists that have that aptitude and that ability to learn those type of advanced algorithmic type of things, it's not common, right, to have a citizen data scientist. It is much more common to have a savvy business analyst who can, who can use some SQL and things like that. And we want to enable that. We want to make that possible with a single source of truth, as many of the folks have said. An algorithm in the wrong hands could go really wrong. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at skills and abilities, that you're leveraging the organization in the right way.
Kala, what's your experience at Cognizant?
For us, ours, we call it a center of excellence function, works complementary with citizen data science teams. So using a centralized platform, of course, data hygiene, it plays a very important role. Accurate data equals to, correct reporting and accurate KPI delivery. So using our centralized platform with curated data sources that enable our citizen analytics and AI through low code, no code. We use the word low code, no code a lot in our notebook-based environments. So this creates an effective partnership between our center of excellence team and our citizen analytics teams, which we have quite a large number of them, and also promotes a collaboration, and sharing of results. But we do have our platforms with role-based access, and and again the workflows that provide approvals of the data owners, etc. So it's not just come in and create your free dashboards, etc. So with an AI first approach to analytics and solving our problems, data scientists are key to effectively scale across the entire organization to fully capitalize on our data and incorporate it into their own practice. So for us, they're able to leverage our common DNA platform without having to worry about performing the underlying data engineering, data management, and administrative tasks to necessarily successful enterprise level analytics. So we have a cohesive enterprise data strategy that combines with our citizen AI. So just to reduce time it takes to deliver insights and improve our bottlenecks. That just makes it easy to scale as well. So that's really has been our strategy as well. Of course, our governance around our single source of truth that we use, it's always our priority.
So given that we only have a few minutes left, I'm going to change up the last question. I was really impressed a few years ago with Cornell at Target being such a data-oriented CEO. How important is it to have a data-oriented leader at the top for you guys all to succeed at what you're doing? So let me start with Sharon.
I think it's critical. I've had that at Michael Kors and now at Capri. And without that leadership, it is very hard, and it's a funding issue too, right? This isn't cheap. This is not cheap. And you need to get the people with the skills and the talent and the capabilities in place to succeed. And so without that senior level understanding of how data-driven decision making can, or really it's the quality of decisions that are being made, impact the business outcomes, then it's an uphill battle, because you're trying to prove something that your CEO doesn't believe in. It's pretty difficult. So I kind of feel like I've been very, very fortunate to have that support, and can't imagine doing what I've done over the past 6 years without having that, and having to try and explain the value of data-driven decision-making to people. That just adds a level of complexity and difficulty that fortunately I haven't had to deal with.
Robin.
Yeah, I would agree with Sharon. I think it is very, very important to some of the points I was raising about culture. Having a full appreciation of what it takes to be a data-driven organization, I don't think is necessary, but leveraging data and being very cognizant of the importance of data in decision-making, in understanding the customer and understanding kind of the metrics of how your business is running, and in order to be able to sort of anticipate changes in the marketplace and stuff. I think having an appreciation for data and analytics and insight that's going to enable that is super important. And, one of the things that I've observed here is that we have strong leaders across the executive team that really embrace data. Like our head of HR is just phenomenal when it comes to embracing data. And it's not just the traditional data that you would see coming out of HR. She's really gathering as much information. Like she's my best witness to really good use of data, because she's looking at it like, how can I accumulate as much data as possible about my universe, and then really, really trust that data to make decisions, even if it's a decision that I wouldn't have made without the data, or I don't feel like 100% comfortable making. I got to explore it because the data is telling me. That is just such a awesome example for the entire organization to witness and see that it's incredibly powerful. So I think that certainly at the very top, the CEO, but the surrounding leadership is also very influential and important.
What a great story. Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree that having data-oriented leader at the top is essential, right? I think that for my particular context, I've been at obviously a very data-driven organization at American Express prior to this, and then at Albertsons now, where they're on a transformation, right, to like bring real data customer-centric capabilities to the grocery business. I think that top-down support is definitely there. I think one of the differences, which may be surprising to this audience, is that the amount of data in retail grocery is exponential to what it was at American Express. So I think that creates an interesting challenge for us at Albertsons, in that it becomes like analysis paralysis. You have so much data that you can get into, and so many different questions it can answer, that you become just keep looking forever. And I think that making insights actionable in that type of big data environment that I'm in now requires data science. You could look at the same report on a metric, so many different metrics, but really coming to decisions that can be made that drive the business forward strategically is a data science problem, because the data is so big. So I think that's what's really interesting to me about 10 months into this role at Albertsons, is that it is a pure big data science problem. And I'm really excited to tackle that and see what that looks like, when it comes to how we interact with our customer. It's a very true omni-channel personalization problem, right? And it's very, very interesting and exciting.
I just want to thank CDO Club. I've been with a group of all-stars today, so I've been thrilled to be here and to help navigate this conversation. Keller, what would you add as a final comment?
I think all of you have very well covered. I don't think there is a whole lot to add, because I totally agree with it. Having a data leader at the top, having a seat, at the table, at the level, I think it's very, very important, because data is an enterprise asset. That's how at Cognizant and we view that and we want to build intelligent applications. Earlier we used to build applications, and now we have the knowledge, we have the data that tells us the right stories. And so we want to tap the best of our data and build the intelligent applications that we want to build. And also intelligence into our systems, intelligence into our reporting, intelligence that we want to use this intelligence to, take it to market for growth and, revenue and all of that. So it translates right top there. So having a data leader at the top, I think that helps the organization bring everything data under a single umbrella. And then that helps then drive the business value.
Well, thank you all. This has been absolutely amazing. I have so many notes of beautiful things that people said, belief systems and data, and relating it back to the decisions, and they go on from there. And obviously the importance of governance in here too. Thanks again for all coming today.
Welcome to Practical Digital and Data Transformation, Lessons Across Industries. I'm Michael Kriegsman, the publisher of CXO Talk and an industry analyst. We have a great panel today. I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists, and then we are going to dive in. Anjali Reddy is the Global Data Governance Officer at Citi Commercial Bank. Bernardo Rodriguez is the Chief Digital and Technology Officer at JD Power. Bharti Rai is VP and Head of Insights, Analytics, Data, and Commercial Operations at Novartis. Brian O'Dwyer is Head of Data and Insights at New York Public Radio. Bernardo, let's start with you. I think we need to begin by discussing what do we mean by digital transformation, data transformation. And so tell us, what do these terms mean at your organization and in your industry?
Yes, thanks a lot. Great to be here. When I think about transformation, we need to start thinking about what is the goal of transformation, correct? And when eventually we will know that we are making some good progress. So what comes to mind is that the reason we need to build a transformation is to be able to execute innovation with more speed and flexibility than otherwise, correct? So if we want to increase speed and flexibility of building new products or enhancing new products, then we have to think about what are all the constraints that are preventing us from doing that, correct? Which is the real complex transformation and how to make it more tangible. So there are constraints in the infrastructure, correct? We have to build a technology infrastructure that is open and scalable. There are constraints about data. We have to stop having siloed data and be able to bring data together, normalize it to be used across all applications that we're building. There are constraints about applications that cannot be siloed, that has to be open and talk to each other. There are also around constraints about product development, correct? We need to move to a world where there's user-centric product teams that can in a way that is agile, converge into products that are good for customers or clients, correct? The important thing of all that is that it's not a single discipline that has to make a change. It's the whole full stack from technology to data all the way to products. And if you think about it, there are constraints that make all that more difficult or more simple, which are related to the whole company, correct? What is the organization willing to take in terms of risks, capital allocation, et cetera, et cetera. For me, transformation is about getting rid of constraints, about bringing people that can execute against specific business outcomes. Because at the end, any transformation has some leading indicators, correct? Like number of applications launched or how much data can be shared between product teams, et cetera. But the bottom line is that the success of a transformation is measured on either revenues or profit margins, correct? So when we think about building new digital applications, we have to really focus on what is going to be the business value that it's going to bring to the company.
Anjali, this sounds really complicated with a lot of moving pieces.
I think, Bernardo, this really resonates with my own experience of, having done transformation or, seen in the financial services industry as well as the information services. So I think transformation is very, very complex. And I think it's become even more mandatory now with the pandemic that, clients are they want service yesterday, right? Like everything, our products needs to be very client-centric. And the platforms and technology needs to be really sophisticated and state-of-the-art to service the clients in the most appropriate manner. And those are external clients. And then, we also need to think about the employees within the company to create business efficiencies. So I think what you mentioned, I think transformation is really a team sport. From my perspective, I think we are driving within financial services. I mean, there is a heavy focus on compliance, risk. So number one, number two, enhancing client experience and client growth for the business, especially with, like I mentioned, with pandemic. And number three is business efficiencies. And all of these three objectives kind of get tied together. And to enable all of this, I think you need technology, the right kind of analytics environment. And I think data and analytics is really the fuel of transformation. I mean, unless you have good, clean data and analytics, and you can drive from the data the right kind of insights and analytics, you can't do the transformation. So I think data and analytics is at the heart of it, but it involves different functions. It involves risk, compliance, regulatory, departments, finance, and then of course, technology is at the heart of it. So I think, Michael, really, really important topic, something that's, is happening all over the world right now, and companies are, have different kinds of ways to address transformation.
Bharti, Anjali just described data and analytics as being the heart, the engine, the fuel of transformation. So what's going on in the pharma industry with respect to these topics?
So this is a great question because, you ask 20 people, what is the definition of digital transformation, and you get 40 different answers, right? So I think at the end of the day, it's about how do you compete in the digital age when really every industry around healthcare has digitized, and we have not to that extent, right? We're still working on it. So in terms of how I would break it down, right, the definition of how this applies to pharma and healthcare broadly, one, I think it's about using the analytics and of course the data, you have to organize all of that to drive decision-making, right? Can we make resource allocation decisions? Where do we invest the right dollar? How do we change our go-to-market model? So really to power up decision-making. Second, I would say it's a lot around efficiency, particularly on the R&D side. I'm more on the commercial side, but how do you get drugs developed faster? And broadly in healthcare, it's also around, can you digitize processes in the past that have been largely paper-based, like filling a prescription, for example, right? And then the other part, I would say, which is huge for digital transformation, once you've kind of got your data organized and your analytics and your data science acumen upscaled, is can you truly drive patient experience, customer experience, and the whole digital marketing area? How does that change with digitization? And finally, I would say, innovation, right? The whole digital health ecosystem there's a lot of activity going on, there are point solutions for almost every part of the ecosystem. So how can pharma capitalize on the whole digital health space, and what kind of partnerships make sense there? And, can we really push more forward on the innovation agenda?
Brian, what I'm hearing so far is a focus on data, both in terms of the product development, as well as core operations of the organization. So how does that map onto what you're doing at New York Public Radio?
Yes, thank you. So the way that I look at it, or the way that my organization looks at it, is that digitization has to be done to survive in this new modern world. But then a big part of it is also how do you look at data? Data in my world sort of serves both ends. So it serves sort of an internal role and an external role. And by that, what I mean is that from an external point of view, we sort of have to know that are the shows or is the news that we put out resonating? Are we growing shows and so on? And then also, because folks give us money, we also have to find what pockets of people should we be asking for more money. So that's a pretty straightforward product-based thing. But then on the internal side, from an operations point of view, is that we really need to digitize a lot of things, and data becomes the footprint of those workflows, right? So, and by that I mean, if there's sort of a style of writing that is the best, why can't we then just borrow that and sort of scale that? If there's a way that, say, a photo person edits their photos and say we have breaking news and we want to put that out to the world, we can use this coaching networks to be like, put this photo in the style of so and so, just because then it will get out in the world in a very, very best of class way. But then I think that one thing that's a big part of my job is then how do you bridge that in between, right? Because internally, you have people, you sort of digitize these workflows, and you know that folks now have more time to do their job. But then they're also so used to doing all the nitty-gritty stuff that machines will take over from. And then on this other end, you now have like the business of business, right? How do we make more money? How do we grow listeners and so on? So there's actually a cultural change also that goes hand in hand, where now people will have more time to be more experimental, to do these other things, because you've sort of taken a lot of things off their plate. But with that also, there's the data that comes back and sort of tells them whether what they're trying sort of works or does not work. And there's a phrase that's saying that your gut takes you to the mountain, but data helps you climb it, right? And so it's one of those things that I'm saying that now people in rooms can hypothesize more. It doesn't have to be the loudest voice in the room or the person with the best presentation, but then there's a lot more room to sort of try things. And that goes on a farm to farm basis. There are some farms that cannot take that risk just because if they mess up, the consequences are dire. But the beauty of an organization like mine is that we can take that risk, and we need to take that risk in order to grow. So that's how I see the two things linked.
Okay, so implicit in really what you're all saying is this notion of the linkage between the business strategy and the data and analytics. And so let's explore that. Bernardo, how do you establish the business goals and then think of what kind of data you're going to collect and how you're going to analyze that data, and just connect those dots for us, please?
Yeah, sure. So everything has to start by the customer, right? Everything has to start by who are your customer base and what is the biggest problem you can solve for them in a meaningful way. So it starts with that, with a use case. And then you have to look back at what do you need to support the use case. There's a risk of engineers, and I'm an engineer, so there's a risk that we fall in love with what is possible and not what is valuable. So we need to be very careful at letting the needs of our customers pull what we do as a company in terms of product or services. It all starts there, correct? Now, what is important is that when you look at a product and when you decide, I'm going to go after this product, you make sure that you start meeting customers' expectations really early in the product development cycle and start bringing the data together that you need to support those. What we try to do in the company, and we're getting fairly successful at it, is that we're trying to distribute innovation across the company. So the innovation happens and product development happens in a lot of places, because those places are the ones that are very close to our customers. So unleash innovation, distribute innovation, but the biggest point or the biggest thing that you have to be very careful about is how data is being used. So the only real constraint about product development is and rightly so, is data governance. You have to be able to have a very tight process of data governance, a scalable process of data governance, so you can distribute innovation in the company and follow customer needs to build new products and build new revenue lines.
Anjali, I saw you nodding your head when Bernardo was speaking about data governance. Thoughts on that topic?
Sure. This is a really, really big area of focus for financial services and commercial banks. I think, this comes into play because there are so many different constraints into what data you can store, You need to be respectful of customers' privacy, security of that data, client data in particular, but a lot of different data sets. So, I think from an end-to-end perspective, there's a lot of governance that needs to happen from the time that you acquire the data, whether it's internal data or it's external data, third-party data, where you store it, how do you analyze it, and then how do you draw the insights, and ultimately how those insights in advanced analytics are put to use for client experience or client growth or risk and compliance. And the term that I use is fit for purpose, right? Data has to be fit for purpose, and there's a lot of different guidelines to it. So I think, data governance is foundational, and more so for financial services because of, there is a lot of regulatory constraints that are being placed in the US by the OCC. There is the California Privacy Act. There is GDPR. And in my role, we are really strengthening our data governance from an end-to-end perspective to ensure that we are fully compliant with all of the regulations.
And I think I've seen two important skill sets that companies now need to mature at a very, very high level. One is that data governance. I understand that very well. And the other one is that all the product development teams that we have nurtured over the last few years have become very good at design, user-centric design and software development, but they don't know how to use intelligence and data yet to build new products and do innovation. So slowly the product development people are quote unquote integrating into the product intelligence, correct? So they bring in data scientists and machine learning people to understand that agile cycle now includes agile and changes in machine learning algorithms, for example. So it's very good how the industry, it's great to see how the industry is evolving into building intelligent products and at the same time interacting with this layer of data governance to understand what are the limits in which we can use and not use data.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Bernardo. And we wrestle with this, right? Like, in the data world, I mean, you want to use and utilize data as much as you can to personalize content, to customize the content to your client needs. And, there's a lot of specialization that's happening. You want to be able to identify your ideal clients and then, use machine learning and AI to be able to expand the universe of those ideal clients that you could go after and increase your revenue. And at the same time, web analytics, et cetera, visitor ID identification, et cetera, you could use those techniques to be able to expand your client experience or enhance rather your client experience. And I think you always need to keep risk, compliance, and data governance at the heart of it when you're utilizing the data. So absolutely right. I mean, there is always that balance.
Bharti, this notion of intelligence and innovation now overlaid with data governance, you've been building these teams. So when you look at pharma, how does all of this come into play? And what does it have to do with meeting the business goals of the organization?
I'll also maybe address the question around business strategy, because I think it's linked, right? So in the broadest sense, even launching a brand, right? Launching a new product or really focusing a product around a particular strategy, whether it's in a segment, right? Getting deeper in a segment or promoting use of a particular brand in first line or second line, whatever the business strategy is. In the broadest sense, analytics drives pretty much every part of that, making that goal happen. Everything from, are we positioning it right? Have we understood the customer journey correctly? Have we identified points in the journey that need intervention? If we have, how are we going to message to them? What's the right messaging that resonates? What channels should we use? How much of face-to-face? How much of digital? And then, through that, do we need any orchestration of the channels? And how do we better orchestrate? And then measuring, right, the ROI and the lift from any of these tactics. So you can see if there's a broad business strategy, analytics powers pretty much every point or decision-making in that. And to Brian's point, I think it will, it gives you the confidence that whether you need to go right or you need to go left and, what your risk is. Now, if I look at it holistically, right, and I've been building these teams actually a couple of times now, I think it's a tough job, first of all, because there is building capabilities. There is getting the operating model right. There is the mix of resources, how many in-house, how many do you partner with vendors, how many from healthcare, how many from other industries, if you want to have more innovation and diversity of thought. And then the operating model between a federated and a centralized model, right? What kinds of teams do you embed with the business? So the insights are very close to the business. And then how are they supported by COEs or more centralized teams that can build products around analytics and data and scale them, and there's efficiencies. So it's that whole operating model and building side. There's then definitely the governance and the processes and all of that, and the risk, of course. But I would say the biggest thing is the cultural change. And we all aspire to being a data-driven company. That takes hard work. It never stops. And I think it's an evolution. It's a lot of partnership. It's a lot of showing, results, and then getting the trust, and then doing more, failing, learning. So it's a constant cycle, and it's a lot of fun.
Brian, you are in a completely different industry. You're in the media business as opposed to pharma, as Bharti was just describing. Earlier, Bernardo was talking about the need to focus on what's valuable and not just what's possible when it comes to data. How do you weave all of that in, again, to supporting the organizational goals and innovating? And then, of course, there's this culture change aspect that has come up a few times now. So how do you parse all of this and make sure you're doing the right thing for your organization?
One modus of operation is really the size of the graveyard, right? So we want to fail as many times as possible, and we want to fail quickly. And again, I'm saying this just because the risk reward in my business is a bad article, right? It won't really harm the world versus a bad drug. So having that in mind, you are able to go out and try things. And trying things meaning some things will be in the market or some things will be internally, right? So it's going to groups and saying like, hey guys, I want people to do X, Y, Z, or I'm suggesting X, Y, and Z to sort of change things. And so there's the way that I describe it is just there's a lot of hand holding and partnerships, right? Because just as a background, this is an organization that's 90 years plus, right? People have done things in a certain way. People are not stuck in their ways, but it just works, right? But then from the marketplace, you have all these young kids on TikTok now being the newscasters, right? Or your folks who are very independent shops being the newscasters. And so this is the kind of world you are sort of competing in. And so you sort of have to make sure that those partnerships are being built internally and saying that, hey, if we make sure that your work is easier to do, we can have you trying new things. We can collect that data and let you know whether it's working or not, right? And part of that is also us as a team being very open to being wrong, right? So there's so many meetings that I go to with a C-suite that is always just about like, oh, you guys changed your minds from last week. And I'm like, yeah, that's the whole point, right? So it's also leading by example in the way that my team works, in that we will propose something and be sure that it works. And the week or two later, after we've done it and the data shows that it doesn't, we'll come and present it in a way that it doesn't. But that is so as to view in people the fact that it's fine to take these steps, it's fine to fail, and that our assumptions are valid, but we just have to try them. We have to work with the whole org to see where the risks are. So it's hard work, but then I think as Brad says, it's fun in the sense that you get to work across teams with teams who are very much domain experts in what they're doing, but you're also teaching them a new set of skills and teaching them just a way to do things that embed data than sort of their reliance on the old ways, which is like, oh, let's wait 6 years from now to see whether the decision that was made at this point was the right or wrong one. So that's kind of the gist of how I look at it. And again, it's media. So, content is king. So we tend to have good content. And so now it's just a matter of trying a few more things to make sure that the competition that we have, it's not put at bay, but we are also raising the bar as much as possible. So that's how I look at it.
So you're really creating a culture of experimentation. I have to say, you mentioned TikTok. I just discovered TikTok. I'm kind of late. I just discovered TikTok about a month ago, and it's kind of unbelievable. And so you have 100-year-old organization. How do you get them to accept this notion of failing fast, to innovate and to use data? And how do you use data to support this kind of change?
Yeah, so a few ways that you can do that is to find people who are in dire need of change, right? And so that means that folks who just need to show what their results look like or need a new way of doing things. So one thing to keep in mind is that we actually don't sell a thing. We just put great content out, and then we ask people like, hey, give us money because we're creating this great content. So magically it works, right? And so one of the key things is that I think if you think of your true north as just growing the size of how many listeners and readers that you have, then you have to also start thinking about things like this distribution, right? So you can create the best show, you can write the best thing, but if you cannot distribute it, then it becomes really difficult, right? And with that, the way you use data to show that is that you start seeing distribution channels that have been used prior to now, and you just start seeing a pattern, right? So basically being that if I close my eyes and a new show comes out, I can tell that this is the trend it would take, just because distribution has changed, right? So then the teams that are responsible for growth then have that as the basis, being that, okay, what other distribution channels have we tried, which then forces people to not be like, if you build it, they'll come. You have to play an offense game and be like, we will go to these other places and meet people where they are to make sure that great content is getting there. So that's one of those weird things where you don't have to do like lots of experimentation in terms of machine learning and everything else. It's just you look at the set of data and say, this is the base, this is how we've done things. Are we seeing a pattern? And you start seeing that, and then you say the best way to change this is to not follow the same things. And so you start to find people start to feel that they can use that data not as a judgment. I think that's the biggest part, especially in the world of media, right? It's you have to think in a very church and state way, because these guys are, this is a creative world. And so you just can't come and say that your stuff isn't working, but you have to look at why is it not being listened to by more folks, and how do you measure that? It's tricky. It's a very human-centered thing. So you have to be very good at talking to people and making sure that you just don't spit numbers at them. And so that's the balance there.
I love you use the phrase true north to talk about being really clear on what you're trying to do. Bernardo, let's think about this notion of true north and about measurement we have our data, we've collected it, we have our analytics. How do we measure all of this? And how do we measure the success of our data and analytics tools, approaches, and so forth?
Yeah, so a good question, also related to the previous question, correct? I think you can buy some time by giving presentations on an agile execution and executing on certain environments. You can buy some time by showing how cool are the applications that you're building and releasing, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end, at least in my world, what really matters is revenue or margin increase, correct? So eventually you have to show that this all new process that you're talking about that looks very sexy, you have to bring business value. So my advice to the product teams and the people that lead in transformation is really focus early on business value, on getting some wins on the table, because that is the best way to get significant capital allocated to these initiatives. You have to show that this process that we all claim is very good at building competitive advantages actually can have an impact on the top line. One of the things, top line and bottom line. One of the things that happens is that when we look at a product, we look at a product in terms of user value or experience, but we sometimes forget how that is going to impact the revenue in a company, correct? And it has to come early on in the process.
Bharti, how do you think in pharma about the metrics and the KPIs that you're trying to achieve when it comes to data and analytics?
So I think that there are two sets of KPIs. I think the easy ones that most people gravitate towards, right, when you're measuring the success of your data analytics initiatives, are the defensive ones around, did I improve data? Did I improve data quality? Did I improve time to data integration, speed to insight? But I think the more important ones and the ones that you need to get to quickly are the ones that Bernardo was talking about, right? Ultimately making that link to whether it's identifying a new revenue opportunity that wasn't there, right? Or preventing a potential loss or a competitive threat. So there's an opportunity cost that you helped to avoid. Mining something new that we didn't know, or getting more efficient in how your marketing dollar is being spent, getting efficient in how your sales teams are deployed, because we have, several thousand reps in some cases. So I think it's all of those top line, bottom line metrics. But I have to say, it's not an easy and direct leap, even for the analytics teams, to show the ROI of their own work, because I think they're very steeped in how many projects did I do, how fast, right? How many pieces of analytics did I yield? How many products do I have? And what did I automate? I don't think it's an easy shift, even for the analytics teams, to literally take each piece of work that they've done and make the linkage somehow to top line and bottom line. But I think we need to go there, and I think we're starting to.
Yeah, it's a great point. Sometimes building a project or a product that can quickly bring revenue or cost savings, for example, might look short-sighted because there are things that look more important to do. But in the process of trying to do digital transformation, those proof points are really important to convince the executive team or the board that they can deploy more capital because this thing works. So it is a strategy about how to get confidence that this is a good place in data governance, in data analytics, is a good place to put capital, because that team and that process can generate business value.
Anjali, jump in, please.
So what we have done is we've kind of painted a roadmap or a more longer term strategy and gained alignment from our executive leadership team in terms of sort of the overall strategy. And the data and analytics strategy is very clearly tied to the overall growth strategy. And it's at the heart of it. And once we've had this alignment, we have an yearly plan with very clear KPIs, similar to what Bernardo and Bharti were mentioning, in terms of, sales productivity enhancement, client experience growth, how many minimal viable products we're going to create from a data and analytics perspective. And that has actually helped to build credibility, like Bernardo, you were mentioning, right? Like the team needs to feel that it's reaping the benefits, that the investment is having an ROI. And that has, helped us to gain more investment. And then the other thing is, with financial services, like I mentioned, tremendous amount of focus on risk and compliance. So how are you using data governance and data and analytics enhancements in digital transformation, where we're using RPA to automate a lot of our manual processes, because that's a risk to the business, right? A lot of people touching the data, manipulating it, cleaning it, etc., versus we're putting it into an enterprise analytics platform, a big data environment, which can harness the power of this big data and can create velocity in terms of the insights we develop. And so I think it's a combination of long-term strategy and plus combined with a cultural change, and then having quick wins that helps to build credibility within the business. But again, Bharti, as you mentioned, not something very easy. You can have a lot of different KPIs in place, but it's a moving journey to build confidence in the business in terms of the investments.
And Bharti, you are going to jump in. I'll ask you to keep it short because now we're at the point in the panel where we're going to run out of time. And I have like literally 3 or 4 hours of questions that I want to ask you guys, but we don't have that much time. So Bharti, jump in and I'll ask you to keep it pretty quick.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think it's important to build in those sort of pause moments with each piece of work. Maybe it's once a month, once a quarter, to really take stock of the value. And also to get your finance partners and your marketing partners on board with the value, right, of the analytics, because that's a mindset change.
Bernardo, jump in.
I was going to say that's a great point. I mean, many of the transformation teams see finance as the enemy that's trying to constrain expense or whatever, but you have to bring them on board, and they can become an amazing partner when there's full transparency on the financials associated with the work that you're doing.
Brian, let's shift gears slightly here. So you're working with stakeholders throughout the organization, you're working with C-suite execs, and you come to them and you say, you know, our audience is changing, TikTok, and we have to use data and be data-driven, but we're a 100-year-old organization. How do you get all these people together? And is there a tendency, just in general in media, maybe not specifically at WNYC, is there a tendency to say, TikTok, we don't want to hear about that. We're doing substantive programming. So how do you get the stakeholders together?
One thing is that in my past life, I was a media investor. And I've seen many of them fail just because of that, right? So if you think about the smoke-filled boardrooms and you know they're very folks who just didn't want to change because they were making money. It's so easy not to change when you're making all that money. But the truth is that in the recent past, if you look at the decade or so that has been passed, the internet is changing things and changing them really quickly. And so if you there are two sets, you know, the bear case is just, will this incumbency last, right? And so with that, you can take a bet and say, in 10 years, will the world look this way? And in another 20 years, will the world look another way, right? And so I think it's just coming back to very first principles of business outside of data, taking a very multidisciplinary look, and which I try and equip my team. My team is mostly made up of folks who learned how to code, learned their math, but come from very different disciplines, just so that folks can look at things through a different set of lens. And that's the kind of thing that we go to meetings with. And we don't expect buy-in from the beginning, but when we get buy-in, I make sure that we do what the whole group has been saying, which is we get those wins really early, and then everybody falls in line or kind of falls in line and says that we want the same thing.
Yeah.
And the finance group is actually a good group to start with, because once you show them what they can do to ease in their work, they'll be like, yeah, we can do this for the rest of the org, and then that gets done.
Great advice. Everybody wants a winner. And speaking of advice, we're just out of time. So I'm going to go through and ask Bernardo, Bharti, Anjali, and then Brian to sum up your advice to people listening. Everything that you know and you've learned, if you can sum it up in about a tweet length piece of advice, let's go there. Bernardo, we're going to start with you.
Sure. There's so many things that we can talk about, but I will say this. I think that the next battle is around intelligent products, to have intelligence in your products, in the way you interact with your customers. So I would say start getting that tool set inside your company, bring amazing talent on AI, on data analytics, because that will help you drive the products in your company in the right direction.
Bharti, everything that you have known and learned, share it with us so that we can learn from you.
Yeah, I would say that, for the success of these types of data analytics teams, it's very tempting to spend all your time on the technology, the automation, the data, the governance, right? All of that. But I think the equal, if not more time, needs to be spent on adoption. You know, when you build these fancy analytics models and data science models, really, really partnering with the business on how is this going to be used? Is it moving the needle? Measuring it, learning, rinsing, repeating. So I think we tend to get all focused on where the work is, right? Where the bulk of the work is, which is around technology automation. But I think the other is more and more important.
I love it. Again, linking back to the business goals. Anjali, your collected wisdom summarized in a sentence.
So I think there is no silver bullet. I think you got to evolve your strategy and your execution plans with what you're experiencing within your industry in terms of mega trends, as well as within the company and the culture that you're working with, your leadership team, right? And I think you have to evolve it based on, it needs to be an iterative approach. From my perspective, I think what has worked is a longer term strategy to win customers, to gain market share, enhance client experience, but at the same time, taking baby steps in terms of minimal viable products and proof of concepts to keep proving success to various business partners within the firm, and building KPIs that you could socialize, building the culture, etc.
Wonderful. And Brian, you're going to get the last word here.
Yeah, I think the last and not least is just thinking in a compounding manner. I think that it's a very powerful thing to think of. So with all the things that we've said, is getting those small wins and trying to get them as often will one day just work out. But then at the same time, just doing all the hard work, it's becoming easier. And so if a dashboard is your end goal, then you might not be doing it right. But then if working more intelligently is the goal of the firm, then I think that those small steps will compound to like a greater thing. So that's what I'd have to say.
Wonderful. This has been a fabulous panel. Clearly, the common thread has been using data and analytics to support the business goals, to have clarity on the business goals, drive the culture change that is needed, and deliver the strategic results for the organization. And then, of course, industry by industry, it's going to be different how you get there. So now we move on to the CDO Club's U.S. Chief Digital Officer of the Year Awards for 2020 and 2021 with CDO Club CEO David Matheson. David.
All right. What a great job. Two incredible panels, one with all female panelists. We're really excited about that. Thanks again to our many speakers today and also at the three previous events for Alation. Some of those speakers are going to be joining us shortly. So as we bring those speakers in, I'm just going to make a few comments. First of all, welcome to lovely Long Beach CDO Club World headquarters. You're seeing the boardwalk out there live. I'm going to get out there after. It's a nice day, even though the water temperature is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I want to thank all of you for joining from all over the world. When I look in chat, and I welcome everybody. It truly is a global summit. We've got folks from South Africa and Switzerland and Italy. Thanks to all of you for staying up late, getting up early. Really great to see you all here. Also, thanks for the comments. A lot of you people are not only summarizing some of the panels, but the minute someone asks a question, someone else is answering it. So really, really enjoyed today's session. I just want to summarize and say thank you all for all the work you're doing, especially during these tumultuous times, from the global pandemic to civil unrest in the States, and now, sadly, war in the Ukraine. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy and mentally and physically. And of course, we're all being disrupted by these Web3 startups and DeFi and DAOs and DEXs and NFTs. These are tumultuous times. So I would say that really, during the last 3 years, it's really been your persistence, your dedication, and your flexibility that's enabled your company to survive, not only survive, but thrive. So thanks to all of you for all the hard work you've been doing. We really appreciate your Herculean work out there. So just a quick summary, as many of you know, this is our 10-year anniversary of the CDO Summit. We've been running continuously since 2012, 2013. And the CDO Club has given out the CDO of the Year award every year since 2013 to celebrate the victories and success of our members. So you may have recognized in 2020, I did not give out an award. It was such a crazy time period, and CDOs, in my opinion, across all industries and all sectors were facing the challenges of their lifetimes between civil unrest and the pandemic. And you delivered. I mean, you made radical changes in real time. You kept your companies afloat, kept the primary businesses running, and did everything that was on the back burner of the digital transformation roadmap and just pushed it to the front burner and implemented it. From moving the country from in-hospital treatments to telemedicine, from going to schoolhouses and schools to remote learning, and really helped us cope with everything from supply chain issues to personal protective equipment. So you did the job. And in the past, we've given this award to just one individual per year. But I thought that would be a little bit unfair to all the CDOs out there who made heroic sacrifices during that perilous year. So therefore, I'm delighted to present for the first time ever this award to all those chief digital officers who were employed in 2020. I hope you can see that okay. Maybe I'm going to stand up a little. I don't want you to see my business pajamas, but here's the CDO award for 2020, and that's to all of those who were employed as chief digital officers in the US in 2020. Arguably I could have given it to the virus, and there was some conversation about, giving it to COVID, because COVID was the driver that in a lot of ways, which really allowed a lot of companies to fully implement those things like work from home that they never would have considered under normal circumstances. But there was no way in heck I was going to give an award to a virus, because I think you all deserve it. Let's put some humanity back into the system, right? So that's the award for 2020. And now I'm delighted to present the US Chief Digital Officer Year 2021 award. And this gets a little personal. So while we're bringing folks back in, many of you know our origin story, but some of you don't. In 2012, I was managing director of a boutique executive search firm in New York City called Chaddock Ellig. It's now the Ellig Group. And I just noticed that CDO hires were taking off like a rocket ship and a hockey stick growth curve, and nobody was really paying attention. So I decided to pull together an event and a community, and I created a talent map. A talent map in the executive search world is looking at that title, Chief Digital Officer, Chief Data Officer, and coming up with all the demographic data. So compensation, reporting structure, history, previous work experience, et cetera. And I presented it to the Harvard Club in New York City in 2012 to a bunch of high-level HR people in Fortune 100 companies. And they just encouraged me, go forward with this. This is a hot new title. And nobody was really tracking it. So I interviewed a whole bunch of CDOs for that talent map about 2012, 10 years ago. One of the CDOs that had agreed to the talent map was this person. So I went down, I got out of my Midtown office, which was very unusual. I trekked all the way down, maybe it was Union Square or the Village, but he can tell us. But went down there and interviewed him. At the time, he was Chief Digital Officer at Kaplan Test Prep and Admissions from 2010 to 2015. He led digital transformation. It was rooted in customer centricity and experience design. He had the technology, the digital media, the publishing, learning science, data science, and innovation, all reporting into him. And I have to say, he was so interesting that I immediately invited him as a speaker to the inaugural Chief Digital Officer Summit at Thomson Reuters in February 2013. And in my conversation with him, I learned that he really was a rocket scientist, right? In 1992, he cut his teeth as a scientist at NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And he co-founded the Suer Computer Center at NOAA's Forecast Systems Laboratory, where he was conducting research on geophysical modeling, the scaling of massively parallel microprocessors, and the development of scalable libraries for the execution of physical simulation models. So between all that and Kaplan, he had also built and sold 2 successful startups. 2006, he was founder at Mixic. He was also CEO there. And they built multimedia communities for record labels, TV networks, and newspapers. That was a crazy time. That was post Napster, right? So it must have been a real disruptive time. Mixic also built FeedTrace, which is a filtering engine for real-time content, and FeedTrace was acquired by Roll Up Media in 2011. He was also a founder of Procura Digital, which was acquired by Grupo Santander in 2013. And then he hit the consulting world. So from 2015 to 2016, he was managing director of digital strategy at Accenture. He was also managing director of strategy at Huge from 2016 to 2017. And then in 2017, catch up to the present, he was originally hired by J.D. Power as the chief digital officer to lead the consumer brand licensing, CX solutions, divisions and also the marketing, technology, data science, and innovation groups. And in 2019, if that wasn't enough, he added technology to his title, which we love. We love seeing CDOs take those horizontal titles, those hybrid titles like Chief Data and Analytics Officer, CDAO, get those responsibilities, grab them while you can. So kudos to you for that. In addition to all his other work, his additional responsibilities include advancing J.D. Power's digital and AI transformation and leading the company's technology, artificial intelligence, research, innovation, and CX solutions division. I don't know, I feel like a slacker. I don't know how he has all the time for this, but again, congratulations on that. And then in addition to the CDTO at J.D. Power, he's also a member of the board of directors of Next Tier Oil Field, Next Tier Oil Field Solutions, a public company that supports the US oil industry with leading environmental, social, and governance performance. So in sum, he spent 25 years successfully driving digital strategy and enterprise transformation at startups, Fortune 500s, and global consultants alike. He has a relentless customer focus. He's a talent magnet who excels at building high performance teams, and he's disciplined around delivery and execution. He's a serial entrepreneur who's co-founded and sold 2 companies. And he's also been a value contributor to the C-suite community and to his peers. So therefore, without further ado, I am delighted to recognize Bernardo Rodriguez, the Chief Digital Officer at J.D. Power, as the U.S. Chief Digital Officer of the Year. And maybe, Jill, you can unmute everybody so we can join in a rousing round of applause, virtual applause for Bernardo.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Bernardo.
Bernardo.
Would you like to say a few words, Bernardo?
Sure, David. I think that was Union Square.
Thunder?
I think that was Union Square where you and I met many years ago to start when you were starting this club. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, by the way, with this recognition. I mean, there are so many amazing executives in this team that have worked pretty hard over the last 10 years or so at helping companies do better in digital and AI, et cetera. So I'm pretty honored for this award. I really appreciate it. And when I look back at the last 10 years or so, 15 years or so, there are many things that have to come together to make this successful, correct? From technology, software development, AI, design, product development, to partnering with business units and HR and technology and finance, et cetera. So it's I just think I have a lot of appreciation for all those teams and all those leaders that had joined me in this journey. So thank to all of you for this award. It's a big honor. And thank to everybody that has been around my teams that make this successful in a way.
Thank you so much, Bernardo. I should also mention Bernardo has his master's and PhD in computer engineering from the University of Colorado Boulder. And he's back living in the mountains now near his alma mater. And I go,
that's right.
To the slopes too.
That was the opposite of the pandemic. I was able to get away from LA and live now close to the mountains.
Yeah, it must have been very dreary being there in Santa Monica. And also, I should say, congratulations on the PhD. I've always said that CDOs have more PhDs per pound than any other C-suite title, and it holds not only for data, which has a lot of PhDs, but digital and tech for you too. And, maybe we'll involve everybody on the call. I see some old friends on here. I see Robin and Mike Krigsman and, Anthony Scriffignano and others, and Alan Crane. Good to see you all again. And we'll just chat a little bit about these old days, because Bernardo, and remember all those, when we did that first event in 2013, there's a great photo of you and the CDO of Harvard University, Perry Hewitt, the CDO of Columbia University, Srinivasan. And those were heady times, but it seemed like back then, 10 years ago, all of those digital priorities that were on the roadmap and the agenda and the strategic plan, they were sort of on the back burner. It's only been these, I hate to say the pandemic, but it really forced a lot of things that we were dreaming about back then that I wouldn't have thought would happen for 30 years. And it all happened in a span of a couple of years. Any comments on that, Bernardo, the changes in the last 10 years?
Yeah, so I remember that a while back, there were some McKinsey articles that came out about digital transformation. And I was talking to one of my clients who was the president of a large telecom company. And he said, Bernardo, I'm worried because most of the digital transformations fail. And we just started one with a lot of capital. So I'm worried mine is going to fail. And I asked him, so how do you know when you succeed? And the funny thing is that he didn't have an answer, correct? Like, I don't know. We just need to do something, correct? But I don't know what's the end point. And I think that if we look back, we have done a lot of progress. Just to pick some examples, we used to think in the incumbent world that startups were going to eat our lunch, correct? And right now, when you see, there was a lot of really hard work built on the technology infrastructure around all these large companies, telcos, banking, et cetera, to be able to take some friction out of the system in product development. And that caused that over the time, now we're doing pretty good. I mean, most companies have a pretty good, solid technology platform. They have agile teams that work on product development. They're putting now analytics and AI in some of the product lines, et cetera. So we have had tremendous progress. At the beginning, we didn't know exactly what we were doing, but now I think we had done a lot of work to catch up to some basic stuff around user experience and product development. And now the next wave is going to be intelligence, correct? How to build applications and personalized experiences with intelligence behind it.
Absolutely, great points. And maybe by show of hands, does anyone want to comment on any of this? Looks like you guys have unmuted, some of you, maybe some of you want to chance. Maybe by a show of hands, if you want to comment, and I'll keep rolling if not. As I said at the very first event, Bernardo too, digital transformation is important for companies to raise revenues, cut expenses, improve customer service, reduce reduce business friction, improve efficiencies. But as I said at the very first summit, there's something more important about what we're doing here, that digitizing supply chains, first responders, education, healthcare, telemedicine, work from home. This is so important, not just for business, but for society as a whole. So just want to, again, thank you. I know we've got a broad representation of regions and sectors on the call right here. And it's just so important, the work that every one of you are doing out there. So, thanks again for that. And not to quote Satya Nadella again, but, Satya Nadella of Microsoft said when the pandemic first started, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in just 2 months. And how right he was. And now we're adding even more to the agendas like intelligence, as Bernardo says. I would also add to that, probably explain, if you're going to add intelligence, and I assume by that you mean AI, we're going to need to improve visibility and explainability. When the auditors come and the regulators come, we're going to have to be able to explain not just the algorithms, but what goes on, the provenance of the data that goes into the algorithm. There's a lot of explaining to do. The other would be security. As we're entering this new world, we all see the cyber war being carried out, that's right up to today. So many more things we need to be, careful of and more, deliberate about. Any other comments? Anybody, Bernardo, or anybody want to jump in? All right, great. Well, congratulations again. Yes, Anthony.
I'll just say, I love what you just said about, first of all, of course, congratulations. I love what you just said about, how will we know when we succeeded? And it's very often a lot easier to define failure than it is to define success. The environment is changing so fast right now that this whole fail fast thing takes on a whole new meaning. The kinds of things that you're doing, the kind of problems that you're facing, and the variety of corpora of data in which you face it, that's what it's all about, is constantly re-asking that question of what are we doing, why are we doing it? The journey that you set out on is very often not the one you succeeded in because the problem changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Myles.
Isn't it that you've been able to redefine value propositions for organizations and you're actually seeing them succeed in the marketplace? Isn't that a great measure of transformation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Angeli.
So I think, the industries and the sectors are so different and the problems they're trying to solve is so different. And with the amount of data that we have, I think you have to constantly kind of evaluate your strategy and your roadmap to achieve those objectives. So I think that's a big challenge for every single industry, that you have to be constantly understanding the dynamics in the industry, or modify your approach, get alignment from your stakeholders. And obviously, in financial services, it's a big deal of using AI for solving these problems, like you mentioned, David, around explainability, et cetera.
Absolutely. Thanks. And by the way, Angeli Reddy is Chief Data Governance Officer at Citi Commercial Bank. Anthony Scriffignano, Senior VP and Chief Data Scientist at Dun & Bradstreet. And it looks like Mark had something to say. Mark is joining us from South Africa. How is life in Joburg this morning, Mark?
It's very, very beautiful here. Thank you so much. First of all, congratulations, Bernardo.
Thank you.
You've done very, very well for yourself. But I think I wanted to just point up on the issue of trust. I think when you look at maturity in analytics and adoption of AI, it's coming down to trust. Every organization is investing. The technology is not a problem anymore, but people, whether it's internal employees or stakeholders, as well as external customers, they want a bit of assurance that range from, safety, responsible use of these technologies, but also assurance from the value these technologies are bringing to them, including the future of work, the human-machine partnership, which is maybe a way of working for the future. So if we can get along everyone so that they can trust technology, then it will accelerate transformation.
Absolutely, Morgan. 5 or 10 years ago, there was so much fear about taking your content that was on-prem, especially in fintech, healthcare, and it doesn't seem to be an issue today, right? That's trust. I mean, you want to be able to trust Amazon, you've got to trust IBM, you've got to trust your hosts with your data, especially real-time data and personal data. So that is the most important thing, I would say. And Mark, of course, at FNB, first ran in banking. I also see Roberto Moraga, who's here, I think from London, and I know he was at Barclays before. Yeah, any comment, Roberto?
Not exactly. I was at Lloyd's, actually. There's no Barclays.
Lloyd's, sorry.
So.
Sorry, Lloyd's, 150.
First of all, felicidades a Bernardo. Very, very well deserved. I mean, I'm starstruck. I mean, while David was reading all your accolades, I mean, maybe I'm on the wrong panel here. Yeah, what I would say, and back to what we say, Mark, I think we're now, if you are successful in this digital transformation, the flip side of that is you are becoming more visible, and you're becoming more, it's impossible to hide from your responsibility as a company. So it's now beyond the fact that we are all regulated as company, whether we like it or not, whether we're banks or actually companies like Schneider. I really believe that trust become the difference between having a product or not having a product in the digital world. Because as long as, if I can't touch it, if I can smell it, if I can taste it, and it's digital, I have to trust that what you're giving me is giving me value. So that becomes an incredibly subtle thing, because trust is an emotional thing in a way, right? So it's no, you can't build it in an algorithm. So it's fascinating to watch.
Absolutely. And trust, in banking, especially, Lloyd's is such a well-established firm. You were chief data officer there. Now you're at Schneider Electric. And I hope to get back to London soon. Last time I saw you, you were at our...
We are in the land of the free now. No masks, no checks, no... Come. Doors are open. Doors are open.
On the plane. Absolutely. I'm an Anglophile. I can't wait to get back. I think you were at our 2017 London Summit where you spoke. So that's been 5 years. Time flies.
Flies.
Well, great. Any other comments? Anybody else? Yes, Michael Krigsman.
Well, first, congratulations to Bernardo. Bernardo, you were fantastic on the panel, and you're kind of a Superman hero. So congratulations to you.
He's hiding his cape.
As I've interviewed so many people on CXO Talk, this issue around gaining clarity for the business goals, right? Why are we cultivating this data, developing this data and the analytics? And then to Mark's point, the issue of trust then becomes absolutely crucial to align the organization, to get people in the organization behind the data initiative. Because if you don't have that trust, then you can't possibly foster the culture change that Anjali was talking about. And so it all comes together. And I think that's one of the reasons that digital transformation is so difficult, is that you've got all of these different moving parts. And if you just do one piece of it in isolation, it's not going to work.
Yeah, great points. By the way, we had on that note on trust, we had the chief privacy officer for IBM on a previous call. And her example was, for the data people out there and the analytics people out there, you got to make sure the provenance is right, the data is cleansed, et cetera. And with regard to PII and GDPR and CCPA, She said, IBM has 400,000 employees. You can't expect all 400,000 employees to be privacy experts. You just can't. You've got to build that intelligence in from the beginning all the way through the chain, so that when the end user gets that data and that information, they know that they can use it in the purposes for which they need to use it. So it's not easy to do. It's hard work. I think GDPR got us all ready, and I would suggest that what Inderpal did at IBM, he made sure that he automated when those first privacy regulations came out, so that it would be easier to do the next regime that comes along for CCPA, et cetera, et cetera. So try to automate as much of that as possible, so you're not manually doing this for every privacy regulation that comes out. So with that, I want to thank everybody. And by the way, I should have introduced you all at the very beginning. These are all the speakers who were at the 4 Alation events, not all of them, but the majority of them. We had 3 events prior to this. I encourage you to see those. We're going to save this video, and we'll send you a link to the on-demand version right after this event is over. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us today, and congratulations to Bernardo. Thanks to all our speakers, and of course to everyone who joined us in the audience in chat for participating. And most importantly, I just want to thank Alation and the entire team there for bringing these informative programs to you during these challenging times, especially Brandon Paskey and all their moderators for the series, Ibi Rahmani, John Wills, Jason Lim, and of course, Myles Suer had that fabulous panel earlier today. Thanks for everything, Alation. Thanks for everything that you're doing out there, CDOs. Keep it up. You're doing a fantastic job. Till next time, everybody, stay healthy and see you next year.